If you don't know who you are, someone else will decide for you and they'll sell you short every time. We accept the love we think we deserve. That line, from the perks of being a wallflower, is more than just a quote, it's a warning. It tells us something uncomfortable. People often treat us according to the value we put on ourselves. And that means if we're not careful, they will devalue us, unless we do this. So what is this? It's deciding that your value isn't up for public debate. It's choosing to stop apologizing for taking up space. It's learning to say no without explaining. It's realizing that your time, your energy, your love are all currencies, and like any currency, they lose value when you hand them out without care. People tend to assign your value based on how you present and protect it. It's not always fair, but it's real. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate, by how you carry yourself, and by what you're willing to accept. You could be brilliant, kind, loyal, and full of potential, but if you walk through the world unsure of yourself, constantly second-guessing, constantly apologizing for simply existing, people won't see what's truly there. They'll respond to what you project, not who you are. Think about it. If you walk into a room like you don't belong there, most people will believe you. If you downplay your achievements, people will assume they weren't that impressive. If you speak softly about your boundaries, people will treat them like suggestions instead of limits. It's not about arrogance, it's about ownership. It's not saying I'm better than you, it's saying I know who I am and I refuse to be anything less to make others more comfortable. Imagine a priceless painting hanging in a dusty hallway with no frame, no lighting, and no protection. People will walk past it without a second glance. But put that same painting in a museum, under glass, with a spotlight and a velvet rope around it, and suddenly everyone treats it differently. They slow down, they look closer, they show respect. The painting didn't change, its presentation did. Its value didn't increase, but people's awareness of its value did. That's what happens with us. We can't expect others to recognize what we don't highlight or protect. If we act like our time doesn't matter, people will waste it. If we act like our feelings are disposable, people will treat them like trash. It's not that they're trying to hurt us, it's that we're giving them the script, and they're reading from it. People are observant, they watch how we respond to disrespect. They notice if we speak up or stay silent. They notice if we set boundaries or just sigh and say nothing. And when they see we don't protect our value, they start to believe we don't have any. That's why this matters. Because how you present and protect your worth is the loudest statement you'll ever make, louder than your words, louder than your resume, louder than your achievements. You may not be able to control how everyone sees you, but you do control the energy you send out. And that energy tells people whether to honor you or overlook you. So the question is, what are you teaching people about your value right now? What do your words, your posture, your choices, your boundaries say? Because whatever they're saying, that's what others are listening to. Self-respect is not optional, it's foundational. It is the quiet force behind every boundary we set, every relationship we choose, and every decision we make. Without it, everything else in our lives becomes shaky. No matter how smart we are, how successful we become, or how much others admire us, because when self-respect is missing, we're constantly negotiating with the world about what we deserve. instead of knowing it deeply and moving accordingly. Think of a house. You can paint the walls, decorate the rooms, and fill it with beautiful things, but if the foundation is cracked, everything is unstable. That's what life is like without self-respect. It might look okay from the outside. You might even convince people that things are fine, but deep down you know something is off. You feel the cracks every time you say yes when you really mean no, every time you let someone cross a line because you don't want to be difficult, every time you downplay your voice to keep the peace. Without self-respect, we become actors in our own lives, performing for the approval of others, while quietly losing touch with ourselves. Self-respect starts with a decision: I will not betray myself to please others. That sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult in a world that rewards compliance over authenticity. From an early age, we're taught to seek praise, to be liked, to be accepted, to be agreeable. We learn that being chosen matters more than choosing ourselves. But if we live only to be liked, we'll accept treatment we know is wrong just to avoid being left out. We'll allow people to speak to us in ways that make us shrink. We'll stay in relationships, jobs, and environments that drain us, all because we haven't yet learned to value ourselves enough to walk away. Respect isn't something you ask for with words, it's something you enforce with actions. You don't demand it from others, you embody it for yourself. When you respect yourself, you don't need to beg someone to see your worth. You don't keep proving you're enough. You stop auditioning. You start realizing that anyone who can't see your value isn't your audience. And that's where peace begins, not when everyone finally treats you right, but when you stop settling for those who don't. Self-respect means walking away, not out of anger, but out of alignment. It means choosing your dignity over temporary comfort. It's recognizing that you are not hard to love, but that your love shouldn't be earned through self-sacrifice. You shouldn't have to bleed emotionally just to feel seen. Too many people confuse love with endurance, believing that if they just hold on long enough, suffer silently long enough, they'll finally be enough for someone else. But true love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. True love meets you where you stand, not where you've been dragged. One of the clearest signs of self-respect is the ability to be alone without feeling incomplete. When you respect yourself, you stop fearing solitude. You stop seeing being alone as a problem to be fixed. Instead, you recognize it as sacred space, space to grow, to breathe, to understand yourself beyond the noise of others. There's something powerful about sitting with yourself and feeling full, not because someone else told you you're worthy, but because you know it, independently, internally, quietly. There will be times when self-respect feels like loss. Walking away from something toxic can feel like failure. Saying no can feel like rejection. Setting a boundary can feel like pushing people away. But over time, you'll see what's really happening. You're not losing anything worth keeping. You're making space for what respects you back. The things, people, and opportunities that are truly meant for you won't require you to shrink, suffer, or sacrifice your sense of self. They will recognize your worth because you've already claimed it. And let's be honest, it's hard, especially if you're used to playing small. Especially if your value was never reflected to you growing up. Especially if you've been taught that your needs are a burden, or your voice is too much. But self-respect isn't about pretending to be fearless. It's about choosing yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when people don't understand, because your peace is not a group project. and your worth is not up for negotiation. There will be voices, some external, some internal, that try to convince you that self-respect is selfish, that choosing yourself means you don't care about others. Saying no makes you cold. But those voices are often the echoes of people who benefited from your lack of boundaries, people who were comfortable when you, people who preferred you, easy to control, easy to please, easy to manipulate. When you begin to stand in your self-respect, don't be surprised if you start to make some people uncomfortable. That's not your fault. That's the discomfort of watching someone refuse to be used, and it's not about perfection. Self-respect doesn't mean you always get it right. You'll still you'll still have moments where you fall back into old habits. But the difference is, you'll recognize it faster. You'll feel the discomfort of betraying yourself, and that awareness will become your guide. That's growth. That's self-respect. In action, not flawless behavior, but consistent return, no alignment. The more you live from a place of self-respect, the more you'll notice how things begin to shift. The conversations you tolerate become more honest. The people around you either rise to meet your standards or fade away. Your decisions become clearer, not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer confused about who you are. You begin to trust yourself. You stop asking the world for permission to be whole. Self-respect is the soil from which all other healthy things grow. Confidence, peace, purpose, they're all rooted in how we see ourselves. You can't build a good life from self. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't truly love others while abandoning yourself. The foundation has to be solid, and that means making a daily decision to honor your own dignity, even when no one else is watching, especially then. Because at the end of the day, you live with yourself. You go to bed with your thoughts. You carry your choices, and only you know the cost of betraying your own heart. Self-respect isn't a luxury you earn after reaching some external success. It's the quiet, daily practice of showing up for yourself, speaking the truth, and choosing not to settle for less than you deserve. It's a baseline, not a bonus. It's the beginning of everything that matters. So protect it, build from it, return to it whenever the world tries to pull you away. Because without it, you will always be looking outward for validation that can only come from within. But with it, you stop chasing, stop begging, and start becoming. You stop asking for a seat at the table and start building your own. Self-respect is not optional. It's foundation, and the moment you understand it, is the moment you begin to live different, not not harder, just clearer, firmer, truer. Because when you respect yourself, the world begins to shift, not because it changed, but because you did. You said, if you don't define yourself, others will do it for you, and they'll get it wrong. Not because people are malicious, but because most of the world isn't paying close enough attention to truly see you. They're too busy projecting their own beliefs, expectations, insecurities, and assumptions. And if you don't stand up and say, this is who I am, they will, and what they write into those blank spaces will be based on stereotypes, half-truths, surface impressions, or whatever makes sense to them. You'll be reduced to labels, misunderstood, oversimplified, boxed in. The world loves categories. It wants you to be easily defined, easily labeled, easily managed. Are you successful or a failure? Are you introverted or extroverted? Are you strong or weak? The world wants to file you away like a document in a drawer. And if you don't take charge of your narrative, someone else will hold the pen. They will decide whether you're worthy. They will decide what you're capable of. They will decide what role you're allowed to play in your own life. And that is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. Every time you stay silent when you should have spoken, every time you pretend to be what they expect, instead of who you are, when you let others define you, you begin to live reactively. You shape yourself around what people want, instead of what's true. You become a chameleon, constantly adjusting your colors to match the room you're in, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you no longer recognize yourself. You've been edited, trimmed down, packaged. You've allowed people to write your story, but they don't know the plot. They only skim the surface. They won't see the history, the battles, the scars, the strength it took to stand where you are. They only see the version that's easiest to consume. When people tell you you're too emotional, so you learn to hide your. When they say you're too ambitious, so you tone yourself down. When they say you're too quiet, too loud, too soft, too intense, and you internalize it, you begin to doubt yourself. You start second-guessing your instincts, and instead of leading your life, you start managing other people's opinions of you. You give them the keys to your identity. But here's the problem. When other people hold the keys, they can lock you in. They can trap you in a version of yourself that fits their comfort zone, but suffocates your spirit. There's a line in the Four Agreements that says, don't take anything personally, because what others say about you is more about them than it is about you. Their judgments are often a reflection of their limitations, not your reality. But when you haven't defined yourself, when you haven't rooted your identity in something real and solid, you become vulnerable to those judgments. You begin to absorb them. And over time, you begin to live down to their expectations, instead of rising to your own potential. Defining yourself doesn't mean you have to shout your identity from the rooftops. It doesn't mean being loud or aggressive. It means being clear. Clear about what you value, clear about what you stand for, clear about what you will and won't accept. It means knowing your story so well that no one else can twist it into something it's not. Because people will try. They'll call your confidence arrogance. They'll call your silence weakness. They'll call your kindness naivety. But if you know who you are, none of that sticks. Their words bounce off the truth you've built inside yourself. The danger of letting others define you is that they rarely dream big enough for you. They'll put limits on your growth. They'll tell you what you should do based on what's been done before. They'll measure you against standards you never agreed to. And if you believe them, you start living in a cage with invisible bars. Bars made up. You can't. You shouldn't. You're not enough. But when you define you realize those bars were never real. They were illusions held up by the opinions of people who don't have to live your life. You start to break free. There's power in self-definition, because it means you get to decide the meaning of your experiences. It means your failures don't define you. Your resilience does. Your past doesn't define you. Your growth does. Your wounds don't define you. Your healing does. And no matter what box the world tries to put you in, you hold the pen. You write your own labels. You decide what this chapter means and what the next one will say. That's not always easy, especially if you've been shaped by environments that told you who you were long before you had the chance to explore it for yourself. Maybe someone told you you'd never amount to anything, and you started to believe it. Maybe someone said you were just like your parents, or you were too broken to be loved, or you weren't smart enough, pretty enough, strong enough. Those voices can echo for years, but they don't have to be permanent. You can choose right now to rewrite the script, to say that's not who I am anymore, or better yet, that was never who I was to begin with. You don't owe anyone consistency with a version of yourself that no longer fits. If you grow, evolve, shift, that's not being fake. That's being real. That's being live. Defining yourself is a lifelong process, not a one-time declaration. It's the courage to keep asking, who am I becoming? And having the integrity to follow that answer, even if it takes you away from people who only knew the older version of you. And when you start defining yourself clearly, something beautiful happens. You attract people who recognize and respect the real you, not the mask, not the watered down version, but the truth. And you begin to build relationships, careers, dreams that are rooted in authenticity, not approval. You stop chasing validation because you no longer need it. You have something better, self-recognition. You'll never control how everyone sees you. Some people will misunderstand you no matter what. Some will judge you unfairly, underestimate you, even dislike you, for reasons that have nothing to do with you. But when you've defined yourself, you stop internalizing those reactions. You understand they're just noise, and you return to your center, your truth, your values, because that's where your power lives. So define yourself, not once, but constantly. As you grow, as you learn, as you unlearn. Define yourself not in reaction to others, but in response to your own soul. Don't let fear or tradition or expectation tell you who to be. Don't let someone's limited perspective become the limit of your life. And don't let their small story become your whole identity. Because if you don't define yourself, others will do it for you. And they'll get it wrong. Not because they mean to, but because they simply don't know what only you can know. So speak it, live it, show it, and never ever give your story away.